Flexen, welcome to the latest edition of Seconds Out Reflections. I'm here every Monday, 4:30 PM to talk about the boxing action of the weekend just gone. My colleague John Houston will be focusing in his vlog this week on the Jake Paul show, which also featured Tommy Fury and Daniel Dubois. So I'll let him crack on with that. I'm going to talk more about Frank Warren's Night of Champions event in Birmingham, and specifically the decision in the British and Commonwealth super lightweight title fight between AKEEM ENNIS-BROWN, aka Riddy, and Sam Maxwell, the challenger, and now the new champion, for those of you who don't already know. Unanimous decision in Maxwell's favour, which caused a lot of controversy both in the sport and outside. Interesting one. Not a great fight to watch by any stretch of the imagination, but it did seem to pretty much every observer who I came across on Twitter that, and that includes, you know, boxers, trainers, people like that, AKEEM ENNIS-BROWN had done more than enough to retain his titles. It was a very scrappy affair. Obviously, Riddy's got a very difficult style to move out, always on his toes, throw shots from unorthodox angles, pot shotter, switch hits, difficult to combat. And then Maxwell, I never thought Maxwell kind of put on any kind of sustained or educated pressure. He used those kind of stand-up technical skills, you know, tried to come forward behind a solid jab, but never really pressed the action enough, in my view. And it felt like in a fight where there was a lot of holding, much of which was initiated by Maxwell, it has to be said, albeit when Riddy would come in with his head low and then suddenly come up, or, you know, just take huge steps forward from a wide stance, so kind of caught Maxwell unawares, and he was almost forced to hold rather than give ground or take unnecessary shots. But also a fight which had a couple of, or more than a couple, a number of head clashes, but which caused a couple of cuts, one to either man. Messy, scrappy affair that no one is particularly keen to see again. But it did seem like the rare quality shots that landed, the majority of which came from ENNIS-BROWN. Maxwell landed a couple of solid jabs, one notable right hand, I think in either the 11th or the 12th round. But aside from that, it was scrappy, but particularly when they got messed up on the inside, it seemed to be ENNIS-BROWN who was the one working when they were in those situations. But the three men who mattered on the night didn't see it that way. John Latham had it close, but both Steve Gray and Marcus McDonald judges had it 116-113, which is 7 rounds to 4 with 1 even. It's hard to see how you could find 7 rounds in that fight to give to Maxwell. He had no problem with the decision, unsurprisingly. He said afterwards he felt he did enough to win, that the better boxing skills came from him, and from a traditional boxing sense, he's probably right. But that kind of gives a bit of an indication as to why perhaps ENNIS-BROWN got the wrong end of the decision. I'm not alleging any sort of corruption here, although Maxwell was the house fighter on this Frank Warren show. I don't think that had a lot to do with it. They're both with MTK, despite the efforts of at least one person on social media to blame MTK Global for what happened. They're both MTK fighters, so that didn't make a lot of sense. But what I think it comes down to, and this is something David Lee pointed out on Twitter before I had the chance to, I'm sure I was going to be next up, was that the reason the decision didn't go ENNIS-BROWN's way, and this is pure speculation, but it does seem the most likely explanation, is that the judges just didn't like his style. Now, while Marcus McDonald judged one of his fights before, the clear win over Darragh Foley, and judged him, I think, a 6-point winner in that one, Steve Gray and John Latham had never judged an AKEEM ENNIS-BROWN before. To be fair, Steve Gray hadn't judged a Maxwell fight either, although he had refereed 2 of his contests, although I'm not sure if he scored them. I think they might have been stoppage wins for Maxwell, so no scores required. But Steve Gray's obviously not come into this on the best run of form, at least from a perception basis, after the, you know, letting Lewis Ritson take perhaps unnecessary punishment in a lot of people's eyes in his last fight. And after it was revealed, I think by the board general secretary, Robert Smith, that he sees the way he judges rounds is by imagining 2 glasses of water, one for each fighter, and then you pour a little bit from one glass to the other when someone has a bit of success. This is all in his mind. These aren't actual glasses of water, as far as I'm aware. It'd probably be a bit tricky to keep that going at ringside while also watching the fight. But all jokes aside, it does seem like there's a bit of bias, a bit of snobbery against the kind of unorthodox, awkward, not particularly easy on the eye style of AKEEM ENNIS-BROWN. And in fact, this was reflected across social media. A lot of people I saw, and maybe I should reconsider following some of them, but a lot of people I saw on my timeline were saying, yeah, I thought Maxwell definitely lost that fight, but I'm happy for him because they like him or whatever. But then there was another group of people who were all saying, yeah, I thought AKEEM ENNIS-BROWN did enough, but I can't stand him, so I don't really mind. Or oh, I really don't want to see him fight again. So there's some that don't like him because he's flashy and maybe a little bit arrogant and kind of promotes himself well. And, you know, you don't have to take to everyone, but that shouldn't give you any kind of schadenfreude or delight in someone else's misfortunes. And then there's a flip side, and I think this was reflected in the judging, in that there was a lot of boxers, trainers and so on. Oh, I can't stand watching him fight. I hope we don't see a rematch of this. If this keeps him off TV, I think someone said, then it's worth it. But all acknowledging that they felt AKEEM ENNIS-BROWN had won the fight. And that continued, that was even before the verdict was announced. You know, everyone was scoring as they do, you know, in fight. People were saying their scores at the end of round 8, the end of round 10, and then at the very end. And I didn't see a single person who had Maxwell ahead. Even people who said they liked him, even stablemates, people from Liverpool like he is. None of them. And that doesn't mean he didn't deserve it or there isn't a case to be made. There isn't a rationale why he could have got the decision. I can't see it, but that doesn't mean it's impossible. But the fact that everyone on my timeline, and albeit it is a small kind of section of people, but there's still experts in there. There's still boxers. There's still trainers, pundits. And none of them saw Maxwell the winner or even a draw. It's a bit concerning that two of the judges that are paid to do this, and obviously get their expenses paid and stuff as well, had Maxwell winning, not just winning, but by 3 points or 3 rounds on their scorecards. And if that is the reason, if it is that they prefer the kind of traditional amateur or European style, the kind of upright, jab, right hand, 1-2, kind of basic but done very well approach of Maxwell over the very, very kind of different, awkward, not great to watch always style of Riddy, of AKEEM ENNIS-BROWN, then I don't think, well, it's not, I don't think, that's certainly not a fair way to judge a contest. It's who is more effective in each round, who lands the more effective shots, the heavier shots, more shots in some cases, who's using effective aggression, who's dictating the pace and the style of the fight. And under all those factors, it seemed to me that AKEEM ENNIS-BROWN did enough to comfortably come out on top. And it's just the latest in a long line of, you know, questionable decisions we've had in the UK over the last couple of years. I find myself now, when I interview foreign fighters coming over here to fight British stars, or even fighters going on other promoter shows within the UK, I'm always asking them now, are you concerned about the judges if it goes the distance, given recent events? And this is something that you'd only rarely ask a year or two ago, particularly to fighters who've been victims of bad decisions in the past. Now it's kind of a commonplace thing to question, and that's not good. You know, we were so superior once, looking at other countries, Germany and Italy spring to mind in the not too distant past. And we say, oh, you know, you struggle to get a decision over there, you have to knock them out to get a draw and all of that stuff. Surely those countries are saying that about us now, because it's just become very, very strange. And I think in the pandemic times, I think people thought the judging and the refereeing might get better because the crowd wouldn't exert any undue influence, you know, cheering for one fighter's shots over the other, etc., etc. No, less distractions as well. But it hasn't really worked out that way. We've seen a pattern of bad decisions. It's become a theme in the last few months in the UK, or last few years now in the UK. And it's even gone past the point where we say, oh, Ian John Lewis, you've got to watch him, or Terry O'Connor, you've got to watch him. And these are just examples. I'm not singling them out. But I'm saying it's gone past the point where we say specific judges or specific referees are the ones to watch out for. Now it can be any UK official on any given night who could go against the grain. Except it's not against the grain in this case, because all three of them agreed, and all three of them, in my view, came to a wholly unsupportable conclusion. At the risk of sounding all medical journal all of a sudden. But yeah, I mean, I don't want to just focus on that. I should say that Great performance from Anthony Kakachi to retain his British super featherweight title against the brave game Leon Woodstock. Very, very good fight for the vacant British super flyweight title between Ijaz Ahmed and Casey Kadimi. They'll go again, presumably, as the title remains vacant because it ended in a draw. But an excellent fight to watch. BT got some stick for not putting that on their show, but hopefully it will appear on YouTube at some point soon, ideally. Anthony Yard came back. Not much of a warm-up for Lyndon Arthur, although he says that wasn't the intention if you watch his interview on our channel. But he blew someone out in a round. Very good. But, you know, let's see what happens in the Arthur rematch. That's the real acid test for him. So there was some stuff to enjoy. Nathan Heaney, obviously attracting 1,600 plus crazy Stoke fans, lauding his every move. Again, he wasn't up against great opposition, but just I think they epitomised how lucky we are to have fans back in boxing. They make such a huge difference. And it was great to see. But a lot of the good things were overshadowed by yet another poor, in my view, questionable at the very least, decision. And you've got to hope that at some point the public opinion gets to the point where Robert Smith at the ball decides to do more than just review each individual case and say they found that it was a true reflection of the judges' views of the contest, because no one's alleging it's corruption. I think what the point is, are all the officials aware of what the scoring criteria is, and are they all on exactly the same page, or is there, because everyone says, well, boxing's a subjective sport, and obviously there's an element of that, but how much of it is there are judges who have specific styles that they like, and they're more inclined, even if it's an unconscious bias at this point, to go with the ones that they favour? It needs addressing, because this amount of questionable decisions over the last couple of years, it's not, you know, a few erroneous ones anymore. It's a regular theme, and it needs addressing. So that's what I think anyway. I'd like to hear what you guys think. Let me know in the comments below, and I will, of course, respond to some of them. I'll be back on Thursday for Flexpectations, looking ahead to next week's action. Obviously, Josh Warrington going back in with Maurizio Lara, who I interviewed last week, and the interview's now up on the channel. And then the next reflections will be the following Monday at 4:30 as well. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you all soon.